Good day folks, and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. In the past 2 weeks, we looked at an album by a classic heavy metal band, as well as a title album by a classic glam rock band. So now I see it best to cover an album by a classic punk band, The Clash. Emerging from the very same British punk scene of the late 70s as with the likes of Sex Pistols, The Damned, Buzzcocks, Stranglers, etc., The Clash are among the many to actually continue past the 70s into the 80s and expand on their music. Today though, I want to look at where it all started, with their 45-year-old eponymous debut album simply known as The Clash. And the cover here is a very, very decently well done. A very monochromish, very almost filtered photo of some of its band members in this very ripped paper kind of style, which I guess kind of fits the whole punk motif. All simple and black and white and back to basics, that ripped kind of fitting their amateurish DIY style. And on the back there is a similar picture of various police officers in some form of riot. And funny enough, this little photo here would serve as a form of inspiration for one of the songs of the album, which I'll get into in a moment. So, all in all, a decent and very simple cover art. Sure, it may not be as iconic as, say, London Calling, for instance, but it's still a very good cover nonetheless, and perfectly visualizes their very punky aesthetic. So let's actually look at the music itself and see if it lives up to the punk scene of the 70s. We begin the album with Ginny Jones, and boy is it a starter. Immediately setting the tone for what's to come across the entire album, this demonstrates the familiar sound and style we'd come to associate with not only this band, but punk music in general. The snaring drums of Terry Chimes, the chunky guitar of Mick Jones, not the one from Foreigner, the minimal bass of Paul Simonon, or Simonon, Simonon, and the raw vocals of the late great Joe Strummer. Paul and Mick, in fact, in particular, would go on to perform on a few songs by Gorillaz. Makes sense in a way. 2D himself admitted to being a big fan of punk music, so having to work and collab with some idol heroes of his must have been a wish made reality. As for this song, it was apparently named after an actual person, an obscure English pop singer back in the 1960s, who by the 70s was exposed in a bit of a scandal, mainly that she turned out to have owned and ran a brothel and a prostitution ring. And the lyrics themselves seem to hint at that, about a man going on and on about how repeatedly being in love with rock and roll, getting stoned, and Janice Jones herself, how much he doesn't like his boring job at all, etc. Ending each with the word "whoa." And already that's 3 times in a row where in each album I cover, there's at least one song whose content revolves around, or at least implies, prostitution. I thought I was reviewing rock albums, not Frank Miller comics. But, setting that aside, this is still a pretty good song regardless, and it ends just as quickly as soon as it begins. Kinda like most of the punk songs in general. Next is Remote Control. An obvious commentary on how even bureaucrats, authorities, and rich businessmen are stuck in this robotic, drone-like conformity that we kind of set ourselves upon, really. Referencing stuff like the Civic Hall, London Town, the Mayfair, etc. The complications of finances and accounts and all that stuff. If you have no money or power, you're pretty much useless in this society. A sense of anxiety and near claustrophobia. And funny enough, the band would eventually disown this song, not necessarily because of the content within, but rather what happened with the track itself. You see, CBS Records, the label that The Clash signed to at the time, had released this as a second single after White Riot, without any prior permission or even consulting with the band members themselves, especially when they intended Janis Jones to be the next single. And in an ironic twist or not, to the band at least, this became the very point the song was kind of trying to make in the first place, exploited by a system that would rather abuse and virtual signal for profits that they didn't even earn, individualism, artistic integrity, all be damned. After that is I'm So Bored with the USA, a very blunt title which I couldn't agree enough with, if I'm to be totally honest. However, it was apparently originally titled I'm So Bored with You, as in Y-O-U, and it was more about Mick's girlfriend at the time. I guess they didn't really have much of a pleasant relationship, really, being punks and all. But through a little rewrite or two, it became more about being overrun and potentially dumbed down by the abundance of American media, culture, and politics, which I'm sure isn't totally still relevant now in this day and age, especially in the past decade or so. The verses themselves reference many subjects connected to this, like Yankee soldiers and Yankee dollars, backing up dictator-run countries, the sensationalism of crime and murder on TV, and even the whole Watergate ordeal. If you don't know what it is, ask your parents about that one. The music itself has a very speedy pace as well, that often is thought up if one thinks about classic 70s punk rock bands and musicians. This band may be bored with the USA, but I won't be bored with this song. Another short and fast song is White Riot. And as you could guess, this song is kind of sort of about race. Specifically about how black people in the inner cities of London seem to be among the only few people to actually stand up against the heavy-handedness of authorities as well as the poverty they were suffering through. And so this song is essentially a call to arms for the white working class folk who also suffer through similar poverties and hardships to stand up and fight back as well. They want a riot of their own, brothers in arms and brothers in blood and all. And for a while, there have been a few interpretations of this song supposedly supporting racism, which of course it isn't. Strummer himself had stressed this in an interview. It expresses how we needed to stop these divisions in classes based mostly, if not solely and entirely, on race, ethnicity, and skin color and so on. How we needed to break down the walls, chains, and boundaries that kept us segregated for so long. How we needed to call out the exploitations made by corporate higher-ups in order to serve their own agendas, be they woke or otherwise. Another thing to note is the duration of this track, barely seconds away from reaching the 2-minute mark. This is something you'd notice with some of the songs here in this album. The next song, Hate and War, also offers a bit of irony in its lyrical commentary. Its title, a clear and blunt opposition of the phrase love and peace, is repeated for a major chunk of the 2-minute track. It's not exactly anger that leads to hate, but hate leads to anger. After all, if you hate something or someone, you might as well be angry at such. Plus, how could one be angry without or before hating? It seems to be sung from the point of view of a nihilist or misanthrope, believing that hatred and violence are inherent parts of our lives, our humanity, our every fibre, and no matter what, we can never resist it. Expressing hate for anything, nations, currency, junkies, cops, even holidays. I imagine you guys hate from holidays from having to fly with Fly Low from Come Fly With Me. Joe Strummer really expresses a sense of aggression and restrained anger, along with the guitar riffs and percussion, remind me a bit of the early classic Stranglers. In a way, I think this pokes fun at some individuals of the punk movement itself. How some people just hate anything without any legit or valid reason, but solely for the sake of wanting to hate something, if not everything. Afterwards is What's My Name? No, not the Rihanna song, nor the one from Descendants 2. This is far superior to either of those combined. Co-written by a brief member, Keith Levine, the song seems to sum up the common disillusionment of teenagers at the time, asking itself what's wrong with it, not feeling all themselves, trying spot cream and crawling on walls. So basically, Spider-Man if he was suffering from schizophrenia. That or the baby from Trainspotting. The lyrics go on about doing random stuff, like joining a ping pong club, picking fights in rows, peeping in windows, etc. Going along with the whole randomness nature of the track, making the mundane seem so surreal in a way. The song is also even shorter than White Riot by 16 seconds. A minute and 40 seconds. And to think my university tutors insist that my tracks be over 3 minutes. How come the Clash get away with that? Speaking of 3 minutes, we come to Deny. When that word isn't being repeated throughout this song, it's phrases like, "You're such a liar" and "What a liar." So this track's about Lila from Miraculous. Seems pretty fitting after all. Actually, looking a bit into this, the song mentions a person saying how they're going to the 100 Club, which is an actual music venue located in Oxford Street, London. Then they say that it ain't their scene. More of an arms race if you ask either me or Fall Out Boy. But then the person turns up alone, obviously demonstrating how much of a liar Mick and Joe were singing about and calling out this person on. Then there's the bit of an implication that the subject is possibly something of a drug addict, saying that they've given it up and had none for weeks, but the singer says he had seen their arms, noticing clear signs of a recent injection. You know those novels and movies, The Man with the Golden Arm and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo? Well, this is the girl with the golden arm. And eventually the song soon fades out as quickly as it does. Probably one of the few in this album to actually do so. Honestly, I kind of wonder why something like this wasn't made a single as well. At least, made with the band's consulting consent. Side 1 ends with London's burning. Yes, before London was calling, it was burning. Perhaps that was the reason it was calling in the first place to begin with. Actually, it was named after a particular nursery rhyme, of which is also known, outside of England alternatively, as Scotland's burning. Not even Edinburgh's burning, or Glasgow's burning. The whole of Scotland is burning? Okay. Of course, the rhyme in question is sort of based on the notorious Great Fire of London. Anyways, we immediately start off with a quick a cappella of the title itself by Joe Strummer, just before the guitar kicks in with a sweet riff along with a drum roll. The song actually seems to be about the car traffic system in London, and how the youngsters might either enjoy it by speeding along the way under the yellow lights, or maybe possibly in a sarcastic manner, going on about how boring and congested it often is. And let me tell you, traffic jams are certainly no fun in any meaning of the word. While Joe tackles the lead, Paul and Mick take on the backing vocals, especially in the chorus, adding to the rebellious tone and mood. There's also another mention of boredom, that of television, sitting around watching it and facing the new religion. Although that new religion worshipped the almighty holiness that is the Fonzie, I think more people would watch it more. And the song goes out with quite a bang as Mick dominates with a ravaging guitar solo. adding to the overall fun of this track alone. If London was ever burning, it may be because we're rocking to this chunky tune so much.